OBS all yesterday.
Man, I'm finally getting why Henry's just fucking always doing podcasts with no shirt on.
It's just
Hot.
so hot.
I'm just fucking dying. I
Well,
was
you're in
like,
a little cubicle, but at least you have an AC unit. I have a shitty ass fan. Well, it's
dude, the
actually
fan
pretty
is
good.
not helping in
My
this
fan
heat.
is
Like,
actually pretty good, and it
it
does
doesn't
not
matter.
do
It could be
enough.
Yeah,
it
moving
could be
hot air
lit.
into hot
You could have
air.
a jet engine outside in your
I
fucking room, and it's not
cannot
gonna
mine
do. Yeah,
Ethereum because my computer gets so hot, despite being at 4,000 RPM for my fan, it still crashes it. It'll
Have
hit
you ever
80.
considered
have you ever considered
making ice
buying an
cubes
AMD blower?
or making ice cubes and then putting them in your tower to create a microclimate?
Giant fucking apartment fire because someone was trying to make $1.50 in fucking Ethereum a day.
I know, dude. Gas fees hit like 500 way, or what is it? No, not way. Yeah, is it way or gui? I can't remember how to pronounce it. I don't really give a shit. But
What gas is dirt right now? Yeah,
no,
gas is
it's
fucking dirt.
spiked like mad today, like mad because there was
Maybe for 5 minutes.
yeah, exactly. And I didn't have my rig running at that stage because it crashed.
You could have made literally 3 cents.
Mm-hmm.
You missed
I'd
out.
have been 3 cents richer instead of 3 cents poorer. So
3
you know what?
cents is 3 cents. You know what they say.
Man,
I know
people
that Canada
so-
doesn't even accept the penny anymore, doesn't even use it, so that 3 cents is almost worthless, or might even be worthless in many cases. But I
Hey, the
still
banks
want
still
it.
have to take your pennies.
No, it's USD, so it's fucking gold.
Yeah, exactly.
3
Give
US
me those
pennies is like
shitty-
1,000 Canadian dollars.
Shitty friggin' pennies. All right,
Just wait for the inflation to hit.
so it's just yeah, exactly. But I'll be doing everything in Bitcoin and Ethereum then, so I'm inflation proof. It's all good, boys. All right, so this is another episode of Hot Takes. It's been a little while, and we thought we'd do one just to be lazy this weekend. So, do you guys want to kick it off, Hubbards, as usual? You can start.
Yes, I'll do my first one, and that's my first hot take. Essentially, is that doctors are massively overrated or like over respected in terms of their opinion on everything, and including doctors overrate themselves. Like most doctors have a cursory knowledge of a lot of different medical things. Obviously, like the medical field is so diverse that you couldn't possibly be even moderately informed on all of it. That's why they have specialties. So obviously specialists are going to be different. If they're in their specialty, you'd expect them to actually be respectably informed about that area. But like a GP will start spouting shit about, whatever issue you bring to them. And it's clear if you've done your own kind of look into the issue that they're talking out of their ass, basically. Like they maybe have gone to a conference and listened to a half an hour seminar about this thing in the last 10 years, and that's all they've really done regarding that issue or whatever. They don't know the latest information. They haven't read research articles about the issue. They haven't looked through medication and read, the reports on the medication, blah, blah, blah. Like they're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants on 90% of issues. And I mean, they pretend that they're, very knowledgeable on everything, pretty much. Or at least a lot of, not every doctor, but seems to be a certain complex that's prevalent among many doctors, general practitioners, that they, oh yeah, like easy, that's easy answer, whatever, this is what you do. I know for sure, blah, blah, blah. And it's crock of shit.
I'm actually gonna one up your little hot take and say that even a lot of the specialists don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Like I've been to a specialist about certain things, and I went and did my own research on the topic, like reading papers on the topic, just to have a little bit of cursory knowledge. And even the specialists were saying stuff that was like out of date by 10 years. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like what's going on here?
Well, I mean, when do you think they went to school?
Well,
More than
yeah,
10 years
that's
ago.
exactly what I thought. I was like, okay, you're clearly been out of, I went to a derm just for reference, and it was clear that the person hadn't updated their knowledge since she was right around the age to graduate about 10 to 12 years ago. And it's just like this, like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, this is insane. Like, I can go read on the national foundation or the international foundation on the disease that I have about what exactly is like the issue on the certain top, like on like like one sub part of the topic, and she was completely off base. It's like this has been common knowledge within this field for this, and it's a very common condition for this common condition for the last like 10 years, or like 7 years really. It's like Jesus Christ, like you have not gone and updated any of your information yet. So I like your hot take, and I agree. No, that's not to say I agree with it. I think there are going to be some doctors who are just like unbelievably up on top of tons of different things. Like obviously if they're a GP they can't know everything, but I definitely have noted that there are many doctors who are not keeping up, and it's like pretty obvious after just speaking with them for a few seconds.
Yeah, I just add like I do get where they're coming from because they're probably interacting with like pretty ridiculous people that, do go on, some YouTube rabbit hole about whatever thing, and they have like,
They have a
your
Google degree.
conspiracy. Yeah. Yeah, they have and they're not probably very intelligent people, and they don't know what a, Google Scholar is, so they're, watching some fucking low quality YouTube video to get their information, and then they're bringing that to the doctors like their pushback, saying, "Oh, you're a doctor, but you don't know what you're talking about. I listened to Gen 46 on YouTube, and she told me that this is how it actually works, and like, she's a homeopathic
Yeah, I was gonna
expert
say
that
I know
dilutes,
what her solution would
to
be.
to the dilutes her ingredients, the essential oils or whatever, dumb shit." So they probably get like 98% of their pushback is from people like that. That is just low quality pushback. But at the same time, that just doesn't excuse them from essentially being lazy, which I think is probably a big part of the issues. I guess for GPs, it's just too much knowledge, but for specialists, it's probably a certain degree of, it's a spectrum of um, competence and willingness to keep on top of it. I know there's like certain requirements for them to like put in so many like hours um, learning the newest stuff, but I bet most of them are pretty lackadaisical about actually making
Yeah,
sure they stay up on it.
here's the
Well, I
thing.
mean,
Like
a lot
I
of the like learning new stuff is done in like a weekend conference or something, and yeah, my experience of doing not obviously doctor weekend conferences, but other sort of weekend conferences to learn professional knowledge, they're just garbage.
I've done the same thing. Like I'm in a profession where they do the professional development all the time, and it is just pure nonsense. Everybody forgets that crap the second they get out of the door, and they're really only there for the fucking cocktail hour or whatever, like the networking event after, right? Like that's half of what the 75% of what the thing's for, anyways.
Yeah, and that's what I'd assume is like you're like you said, you're gonna have it's gonna be some of them that do actually keep up on the latest and
Yeah.
greatest
Oh
in
yeah.
the
There's
in
gonna
their
be some
specialty,
for sure.
but the majority are probably going to coast on their accumulated knowledge and not really spend a ton of effort getting. I mean, that's just human nature, but there's like this kind of weird deference that we give to doctors, and it even like extends past um like medical knowledge. Like, you'll have like, I'm an MD and I like, like this coronavirus is a great example. It's like, I'm an MD and here's my thoughts on um the lab leak hypothesis, using my MD. It's like, what in the flying fuck did you learn from medical school that's halfway relevant compared to a virologist?
Yeah,
Nothing.
or they think they're an epidemiologist and they're talking about how COVID
Are
actually
not.
spreads.
Yeah. Are not. It's like you don't even know what that means. You learned it from Google 2 minutes ago. Like shut up.
It's like, just because you have a medical degree doesn't mean you know literally everything about everything, and doesn't mean your opinion is somehow much weightier. It is an expert opinion when it comes to like virology or some other field that's like tangential. Another one that I see is like MDs weighing in on biology in general, just like
Yeah.
biology. It's like as if your MD degree is the be all end all that has you expert insight into all things biology. It's like,
You know, when you're
Jesus
taught
Christ.
solely how to fix the human body, that means you must be really well versed in all aspects of biology.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like, no, those do not translate. I'm sorry. I'm going to listen to the PhD biologist who specialized in this field, and I'm not going to listen to, Joe Blow, Dr. Fuckhead that thinks that they, because they have MD after their name, they can do a 2-minute Google search and be an expert at what they're talking about now.
Well, I think you also see it in like the protectionism around using the term doctor, because anyone with a PhD can be called a doctor of this or a doctor of that. Like it's a doctorate, but like the only people who use the term doctor are MDs, and they're very defensive about it, like using the term doctor. I have had some professors that want to be called doctors, but it's not the same.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, it
it'd
depends.
be
Like
like,
there are definitely some certain areas where I think like psychiatry, some of those
Psychiatry
things where you're
is an
still
MD.
working on people, right? Like I think that is still pretty valid. But yeah, I have noticed that as well. Where especially like business professors who have a doctorate in business, it seems like that's like one of the big pushbacks. They're like,
But psychiatry is actually going to medical school and
yeah. So
specializing
no,
in
I mean
mental health.
psychology actually.
Yeah.
but I guess like I think an interesting comparison would be um dentists, because dentists go through like similar levels of schooling, and you don't hear like, I'm a dentist, here's my expert opinion on fucking biology.
Well, they
Like,
absolutely they're the ones who take the short end of the stick if they ever try to call themselves a doctor. Like that's
yeah,
like a
Yeah, it's like
running
no,
joke
you're a
in
doc or you're a
movies.
dentist. Shut up. Like it doesn't count. It's like Jesus.
but
Poor
nobody lends
bastards.
credence to their, like, their uh, claims of experthood. Like, no one would lend a dentist credence to, the whole field of biology being their domain of expertise just because they're a fucking dentist. And doctors should be the same. It's like, okay, we get it, you're a doctor, you might have some small extra insight into XYZ,
Yeah.
but you're not fucking Jesus.
Well,
Like,
we can take your word at a higher value than just an absolute nobody, but that's about it.
yeah,
Like you
exactly.
probably have higher than average critical thinking and reasoning skills. I grant you that.
And that's where the buck should stop. Like, yeah, you're a person with higher than
I
average
don't
critical
need
thinking. Maybe.
financial advice from a doctor. So I
Wasn't
don't
that
need.
a stat about doctors?
What's that?
Yeah, I was gonna say that there's I don't know how well this has been replicated, but there has been like some studies and stuff showing that doctors are among the worst investors because they think their genius translates also into investing
And then
without.
just get lit up.
So they think, oh yeah, I'm a doctor. I don't need, some
Man, accountants are
professional.
fucking horrible investors. Like, and they tangentially are related to markets. So it's like, don't like, yeah.
I
Well,
mean, to be fair, everyone's a terrible investor. Like
Except for a tiny amount of people who
you just invest in index funds. Don't be an idiot.
well, if you think about it, doctors know biology, and humans are based on biology, and markets are based on humans. So therefore, doctors are
checkmate.
fucking
We can
experts.
figure it out. There you go.
They're investing experts. So easy mode. They don't need anyone else's advice or opinion because they have it settled. So I think that about wraps it up for me. But yeah, it's annoying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
well,
agree. I don't.
I'll come in with the world's hottest take here then, and that's that your straw that you drink a drink with does not need to last 100 years when your drink lasts 30 minutes. Therefore, plastic straws are extremely overrated and should just be done away with anyway.
I'm gonna fucking fight you.
That's a terrible hot take because it's like, if plastic straws were overrated, then why didn't they just start with paper ones?
They did
Checkmate.
start with paper ones.
Why didn't the buck stop with paper straws? They're so
Because
if they were so good,
plastic.
if they were so good and so there was no necessary innovation needed, then why did everyone move to plastic despite the cost of changing the incumbent system?
Because plastic straws are cheaper than wax paper straws.
So
It saves the
there you
company
go.
money.
you already got 1 point in favor of plastic straws. They're cheaper.
Yeah, point and not in favor is they produce plastic waste.
Man, fuck the oceans. Give me my plastic straw. I'm so sick of Tim Hortons' shitty paper straws. I can't handle it.
Man, it's not just the oceans. It's literally everywhere on Earth has microplastics and nanoplastics in it now. Like, there's nowhere on Earth you go without that unless you go under the glaciers. Anywhere on the surface of the Earth and the bottom of the oceans.
Counterpoint: you could recycle your straws.
Half, if not more, of your recycled plastics go into landfills anyway, because
Yeah.
recycling plastic only really works viably when oil is over $100 a barrel and hasn't been that expensive in a long time.
I was just
That's the
gonna.
only
That
thing
was
that makes
actually gonna be
economic
one of my
sense.
hot takes today, but then I realized I probably should have like done more research. But yes, like I thought it would be funny to say like recycling's actually the biggest fucking meme, and
Well, it
should
depends
be
what you're
done away with.
recycling, but like
Plastic and
plastic recycling is big plastic and big. Yeah, it's big plastic and big oil. We want to make plastic seem like less of an environmental hazard, when in reality, when oil prices are cheap, it all goes to the dump anyway, because
Yeah,
that's the
they
only
just-
place that will take it.
They just throw it out. I do agree
is
in the
just-
sense that I would be all for paper straws, but the fact of the matter is that most of them are so bad that they disintegrate within 2 minutes. Like Tim Hortons straws that I have will literally fall apart within about 5 minutes. It's just awful. So
It's true. I had a Tim Hortons one
there's
today, and it was
Starbucks
rough comparatively.
also horrible. Starbucks can also be horrible. Which one was it? There was one other one I had. Oh, it was a McDonald's one. That was fine. Like, it actually was decent. It lasted
Yeah, I found
for...
A&Ws were fine as well. And this is another point, is I think that the cream will rise to the top on this one, and the good straw providers will win out,
This is
and
such
everyone
a
will have
shit
good
take.
straws.
There's literally more plastic in the lids that they still use.
I
Like,
yeah,
it's
I know.
just like it's such an insignificant waste of fucking time and mental energy to push for paper. Like, what do we have? Paper lids? Like,
Oh yeah, like everything should be moved towards non-plastic for sure. Like getting rid of all single-use plastics is definitely the move.
well,
It's
then
just people like to look at straws as like the epitome of why plastic is necessary.
Well, then don't half-ass it and start with a straw so you have one fucking weak point of the whole system while you're still producing pretty much just as much single-use plastic. Like, I would think, tackle the Amazon packaging before the plastic straws.
Yes.
Please.
Amazon
For
is
the
attempting
love
to
of-
tackle some of their packaging,
For
but
the
they're-
love of fucking Christ, like, if you buy anything from Amazon and then complain about plastic straws, you deserve to be executed on the spot. Like, it's just insane. Like, there's more plastic in one fucking box from Amazon than in 1,000 plastic straws. They have plastic.
They got all
padding,
the wrap. They got the cellophane wrap. Yeah.
on
all of
every. It's crazy. It's
There's
like a
even there's
fucking
tons of
box full
plastic inside. Like if you get an electronic piece, there's like tons and tons and tons of plastic inside of it. There's all the twist
Actually,
ties.
that depends on who you buy from. I got an SSD recently, all cardboard. Like if they totally cut out the plastic. Same with my Sennheiser microphones, no plastic.
Well, that is a rarity because I order a reasonable amount of stuff on Amazon, always just junk full of plastic. And also the most hilarious thing about Amazon is you will buy 3 things and there's no option to like ship at the same time. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, oh, we can ship one day sooner, so therefore we're going to ship it in its own box and then we'll ship the other ones the next day. It's like, man, I'm not that like gung ho about saving the environment, but I can wait one extra day for my other items, to save like an absolute metric fuck ton of plastic. Like I can do that. So it's like, man, I don't know, straws. Like
I think
It's like-
I think you're correct in the sense that a lot of it is a move in the direction that we should be going, but it's one of those like more symbolic moves, and sometimes you need those. But a lot of the time, it's just done, and then nothing else gets done after. Because it's like, oh, we banned the straw, so therefore we don't need to do anything. And I think, well,
I mean, no,
like,
I don't
fuck.
think any. Well, maybe some places did ban straws, but I think
no,
most companies did it their own volition.
Vancouver, BC is going to be doing that.
But
they're-
Canada's banning single-use plastics in.
Or
3
yeah, sorry,
years?
Canada's going to be doing that, but Vancouver also banned plastic bags. There's going
That
to
was
be
overruled the last time it was attempted in Canada, though. I
well,
think it
yeah,
was
we'll
in
see.
Victoria.
We'll see how that goes, but
and another just absolute fucking brain dead move because you know, they don't offer you any better things. Like those, um, the what are they? The
The
cloth bags
reusables.
are garbage. Absolutely insanely garbage. Never would use them in a
Oh,
million
I
years.
have some really good ones, but recently Safeway has like cheap cloth bags, and those things are really rough.
Well,
But
one of
the
the other problems
expensive
is a
cloth
lot of
bags
those.
are
I,
very
I
good.
went and looked up those reusables. A lot of them, the energy and materials, including hydrocarbons, used to actually produce them is like I think it's at least 1,000 plastic bags worth to actually create one of those
Yeah,
cloth ones. So it's like, are you
And they're
really saving
gross and
anything? Like, I don't know if
dirty
you
and
are.
full of germs
no,
and
the carbon fiber
fungal.
footprint is, or the carbon footprint is 1,000 times bigger on a reusable bag as a rule of thumb.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you look
So,
at the carbon footprint, much worse. But
The one,
like plastic is like the next big crisis coming down the pipes here once we solve global warming.
well,
like
I do
here,
like. Here's the thing. I do agree with that. Like, I do agree that plastic is a huge problem because, like, we are absolutely destroying the oceans, and that has to be dealt with. But at the same time, it has to be done in a way that's not like
well, don't
mentally
use
disabled.
fucking garbage solutions. Like, go you do something useful. Like
Exactly. Like, well,
for
like the
single for plastics, I mean, grocery companies are already moving towards like the shop for you model. Just give everyone a plastic crate that you fucking bring to the front of the store.
I think.
but then
Well,
how the hell
I
do you
mean,
get it home?
they don't give it to you, but you can buy those from No Frills, which is funny. Like No Frills
You
has probably the best reusable bag systems.
you just have like a you just put a deposit down on the crates at whatever grocery store you use, and then you just reuse it.
Oh,
Like
Or you
oh,
do it for
okay, I see. Kind
and
of,
you just give
it
them.
would be like it'd be like whatchamacallit, a cart, but you just took it home with you.
great, we already have like I already have like a grocery cart, which is like does a I mean, if you have a big family, probably not enough, but you can just
Well, you
like
could
throw it
get
in
a
the back of
couple
your
of them if you
vehicle.
really needed to.
But at the same time, yeah, it's like go present a good solution, which I'm sure engineers with enough time could figure out how to get groceries from a store to your house
Yeah,
without it being
that's one of the.
I mean,
embarrassingly shit.
just like at Costco, you got cardboard boxes. This works fine for them.
I That's one of the things I never understood. It's you have these companies saying like Tim Hortons, like, oh, we're doing our job to help the environment, and their paper straws are fucking horrible. And I just think, how after all of this time and all of this money are you producing solutions that are so much worse and just make me not want to help the environment just because you're pissing me off? Like, I just don't understand. It's like you are so wealthy that you could have easily come up with a solution. Yes, it would cost you some damn money to do, but you could have done it, and they just don't. It's amazing because I think a lot of this is strictly a it's just strictly a symbolic thing where they don't actually give a fuck in the slightest. They are doing the bare minimum that they possibly can to appease the masses, and then they're just gonna go right back to all the shitty behaviors. It's not to say that all companies are evil or anything like that, but it's just, I don't know, man. It's so annoying.
Well, I don't know. Don't make me have major inconveniences for essentially PR move that has no consequential impact
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly.
Go do something real and then come back to me and you know present that. It's just
Sorry, I will be right back, and then I will move on to the next part of this.
what?
Okay.
I guess we're not going to his
Well, yeah, I mean,
him
I guess
next.
we finish off on the plastics because, I mean, I think it's the good direction that Canada's going to ban all single-use plastics in the near future. Not exactly sure on the date.
I mean, I guess that'll force innovation, which hopefully will make companies actually produce things that are functional. But in the meantime, I don't want to live. I don't want to live in this transitionary era of
This sucks to suck.
Yeah, pretty
convenience
much.
and hell.
Well,
I guess it's your, I think, hot take up next.
Yeah. So my first one is, I think that Canada and America and all Western nations need to institute mandatory military or equivalent service. No exceptions. Everybody who dodges it goes to prison for 10 years, and you have to complete it by about 20 years old. And there's like, if you're the president, your kids have to do double the service. I don't give a shit. Like, everybody does it. And that's a bit on the extreme side, but my general point is that I think there is a distinct lack of hardship and appreciation for what life really is, and I think people need to go out and experience it. So I think mandatory military service, like a lot of different countries do, would be good. And if you can't do it, you have to go do something. And I'm not saying it would be mandatory military service where you sign up and go, go fucking bomb another country, but you'd be sent to like humanitarian efforts. Like, that's more what I think would be useful, where you would go as the military, you would go into like, something like, the Haitian earthquake. You'd have to go there and help out, and you'd have to go see like, what life is. You'd learn a bunch of skills, and you would have to go bond with your fellow citizens, and you don't escape it. It doesn't matter. You can't get out of it at all. There's like nothing you can do to escape it.
I think that's a little more extreme than existing mandatory military in most countries, because in most countries, unless it's an actual dictatorship, your mandatory service is pretty much just kicking around the army base, doing army things, not like leaving the country to do things. But I do think that's a really good idea, to have more of a use for your army if you were going to do it as a mandatory military service, because you obviously have a larger army.
I'm going to zoom in with the hotter take and say that mandatory military service should be mandatory for men, and that's it.
I think both men and women have to do something. Like, I think you wouldn't have to. I think you would actually build a system that's different. It wouldn't be the same for everybody.
Should have mandatory service, like a year of service in something else, but I see zero reason to have women in the military.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
forced in.
Yeah, I wouldn't put that either. Like, I think like the more expanded version would be like, you can go into the military, or you're going to go do something else that's similar, but it's not going to be like the actual combat phase. You will be in something else. But both the military and the other phase, whatever it is, you have to go to a country that has suffered, and you're going to have to go help them. Or you're going to have to go actually do something. You're not just kicking around at the military base, dicking around. You're going to have to go do hard shit, and then you're also going to have to go see what it's like to live in a country that is not functioning at all.
What if other countries don't want you? Like, that's just...
if there are no other countries...
force literal fucking violate... you, by law, have to violate other countries' sovereignty as a requirement of your citizens' upbringing, otherwise they go to jail. It just seems like impossible.
Well,
it's like, no,
it's full colonialism.
I know you. I know you want to
actually what the old Peace Corps was.
Yeah, exactly. It would be like something akin to the Peace Corps or something. It wouldn't actually be like military invades or anything. It would not. It'd be nothing like that.
300,000 people. They're gonna want 300 or 400,000 Canadians a year just to go chill in other countries with guns. This is delusional.
No, you wouldn't actually drop the military version of it into other nations. Like, if you were sending somebody, if you were going to take like the military, like the people who've been trained as soldiers, and there is a humanitarian crisis somewhere in which the Canadian government could help out through bringing over supplies or something, the military would be a part of that. That would be it. Like, they wouldn't be armed, they wouldn't be running around in their combat gear. They would just be there to help out. Like, they would just be an assistance. They wouldn't be an invading force. Honestly, it's tongue in cheek. It's tongue in cheek.
I know, but I get stuck up on I think there's plenty of hardship you could put people through in Canada that needs doing, and there's no need to go foreign.
Just send 20,000 people to reserve in the north.
Yeah,
exactly. Try to make it better.
Yeah, exactly.
Build a road, fix a road for a summer as a road, a military road.
Yeah,
go
or
around being infrastructure.
build a bridge,
you could.
or
That's another way to do it too.
clear brush, or literally do anything that's physical hard and you have to live outside of, quote unquote civilization. I mean, Canada has
Some
the
pretty
most
rough parts.
rough and tumble terrain, pretty much, other than maybe like Russia, that
And
you can
Russia can't access most of theirs because it's national parks.
yeah, so you have like the most possible wilderness and untouched terrain and all sorts of other stuff where you yeah, Canada's perfect staging ground for a domestic um crew, to go around and you know build
As
stuff.
especially if you made the Northern Resource Corridor, and they could just all go up north and build pipelines and roads and railways and stuff.
Yeah, I think you would. It would be something along the lines of if there's a humanitarian crisis that really needs a help, but like a helping hand from Canada, you send the soldiers over, and then you send the other chunk of the corps, whatever it is. Like if there's a female version of it, they can go out and help. Like maybe it's a nurse corps or something, whatever it is, right? You give people options, but the whole point would be there's a mandatory service that you can't get away from. That is going to be hard, but it's going to teach you skills and it's going to teach you to bond like with your fellow citizens. Nobody escapes it. And if you immigrate to Canada, you also have to do some form of it too. It's just everybody in Canada does it. You never escape it. There are no exceptions. Obviously, if you are extremely disabled or something like that, you're not going to be forced into something like this. Clearly, it would be a very like rational program, just like any of the other countries that do this,
Then
like South Korea or Israel. I just think it would be very
I
useful for
prefer
Canada.
the Charles Murray approach, where he has basically a similar proposal, but his idea is like if you complete essentially like a year of service or military or something similar, you get you basically it's like a GI Bill where you get a chunk of money to pay for university or some other such,
Or your trades or
um,
something.
for or other yeah other some such investment into your future. So basically, you're free to skip out on it. It's just then you miss out on, say, several thousand. Up, I don't know what the exact monetary dollar he would put on it, but
Yeah,
in
make it
probably in the
a
low five figures.
incentive rather than punitive based.
Yeah, because then I think it just make it like with the caveat that says if you don't do it or you can't do it, tough. Or if yeah, like if you
Like
can't do it,
you will be kind of considered to be like
if you're
you didn't do
if
your
you
part.
if you physically can't do it because you're disabled or whatever, you don't get the payout. And I mean, say if you're a disabled person and you're complaining about that, well, you already get disability payments from the government in the thousands of dollars.
Yeah,
I
there's
mean,
huge
it's
tax credits for that stuff.
well, there's tax credits and there's straight up disability, CPP
Yeah.
disability, as well as provincial disability. So it's like, yes, it's unfortunate that if you're disabled, this is one option closed off for you in terms of money, but you have other options. Don't, it is what it is. That way, then you don't have like, I'm guarantee you the bureaucracy created to determine who is and isn't disabled for the purposes of this
It would
little
be such a.
exercise
It would be.
would be literally the
Well, you'd
biggest
have the
employer in
same thing
Canada.
because, like, well, I guess no, because if you're a disabled
If
person,
you
they would just
the
say,
disabled person thing would you could just make it so it's self-declaration. I declare I'm not going to do this because I'm disabled. And I mean you could choose to do it for whatever reason. You're disabled, you're lazy, you hate Canada, you are whatever, I don't know. Any reason under the sun you want to pick that you don't want to do that, you can do it. It's just then you don't get the payout and
now
that
what is I haven't read this book of his yet, Murray's book, but I was wondering what exactly does he speak about for his service? Like, what would it be? Is it military or is it? Does he
no,
have
I think it's more along the lines of
civic?
either like military or what's that like Teach for America, and there's another one. There's another famous American volunteer program that youth usually do. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but there's several big programs the U.S. already does for like service orientated, and he basically just envisions the government and or private enterprise creating a lot more of these um, slots open for this, and then eventually get to the point where there's enough slots that if anyone wanted to do it, they can meet demand, and anyone who wanted to would be able to do it, and then there'd be a monetary incentive attached to it.
I like that a lot. I think that's a pretty solid way because then you don't force it, but you actually get a pretty nice big payout, and you get a whole, especially if it's 1 year, and then you get a whole bunch of extra stuff. Like I know a guy on the GI Bill, and he gets all sorts of great shit. Like he also got fucked pretty hard by the military, but the American military, the guy I went to school with, but he, like his GI Bill, like it got him a couple degrees, like even in Canada, because that's where I met him. Like it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an extension of, say, UBI, with also a little flavor of you earned it type thing, which I think that is one of the many critics of, say, something like UBI. Um, One of the main criticisms is that just giving away money with no strings attached means that people are not going to feel like they earned it, which can be psychologically harmful, I guess, so to speak, where
Mm-hmm.
you might be more frivolous with the money, so you don't feel like you earned it. And two, you might just not have it won't help your psychological state, even though you have money. Like it won't fix that side of it. Where I think this is much more like psychologically appealing, because it's like, oh, I did something good and I made money.
I'm gonna say intuitively, I feel like I like the forced conscription idea better because everyone's gonna hate it, and no one's gonna be wanting to do it, and they'll have to do it, and nothing brings people together like being pissed off at the government for making them do something.
I kind
The
of feel
problem with
like there is
democracy
some.
is that this is why mandatory conscription went away because nobody likes it, and even if it has good things, obviously a party that's campaigning to end it is going to get a lot of votes. But I think that like really would bring people together
I
and
do think
shared
so.
being
Like
pissed off to be there.
and that's one of the reasons I said it would also have to be people who, like, emigrate to the country. They'd have to do some form of it because the whole point is every Canadian or American or whatever, they go through it. There's no exceptions, and you go through some form, and everybody hates it, but then everybody comes out the other side like, yeah, I did my part. It was bullshit, but you know,
It becomes such a status thing to be able to go through life without needing the payout from doing 1 year of service. If you could choose that option, be like, oh, you went to do service? Ooh,
yeah,
oh,
like
poor.
you're a
I
poor
think I
fag.
think you could also tie other. Um, I don't recall Charles Murray's exact proposal, and if I'm might be plagiarizing from him, but you could also tie other things to the year of service, right? You could make certain internships and university positions, etc. You could make that all tied to having completed your year of service. So it's more because I think a lot of the, if I recall correctly, like Teach for America and the other volunteer programs, are actually incredibly sought after positions to get, because they are highly regarded on the resume for, say, Ivy League schools and the such. So
Hmm.
it's more like, you did this, and it shows that you're not a completely selfish, trust
Ass
fund
hat.
baby
Yeah.
douchebag, that you're willing to actually do something like hard and not very pleasurable or enjoyable, um, because you actually care. And so it looks, and that a lot, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people do it just out of the self interest, but at the same time, I do think you kind of have to put your money where your mouth is when you do something like that. Like, there's not really
Yeah, like
getting away from it.
it just shows that your self-interest can be longer term than like your immediate gratification. You're looking for longer term gratification, so you're doing things that are uncomfortable for you now at the very least in order to be better later if you aren't doing them out of the goodness of your heart.
And you care about more than just being a hedonistic douche, right? Because if you were, then you just let mommy and daddy pay pay for your way through life, you know, with your trust fund. If you are, like one of those trust fund
I
kids.
think You could set it up so that it worked, but I just think there's a ton of caveats, and you'd have to be really careful about it. Whereas mandatory conscription, we know it works, but we also know it's incredibly unpopular.
I think either way, something of the sort would be extremely beneficial, so long as you were careful with it. That's just. I know people are like, "Oh, that is just such a like draconian thing." It's like, nah,
I mean,
I don't
Canada
think
right
so.
now, I can't remember exactly precisely how it works. I believe you like sign up to the reserves if you go to military university. I'm pretty sure you can just get a free ride to be an engineer, like at least an engineer, through military university here. I'm not sure what other university degrees they offer.
There's multiple, but the university the is fairly competitive
Yeah,
to get into. It's not like if you just want free university, you can just get it. You have to actually have some standards. Need some standards.
yeah. So like something like that being expanded would obviously be good as well.
Well, I think that about
Well, that's it
wraps
for me.
that one up.
I
Yeah.
got nothing.
Um,
I got nothing else.
I guess I'll do my second, and that is basically that the term friend is just like lost all meaning, and that like 90% of what people 90% of the people that people describe as friends aren't really what a friend truly is. It's just, it's a word of convenience now. And most people, I guess, I would say most people probably don't actually have what is classically considered a friend anymore. And the reason I say that is like, in my estimation, what a friend is someone who's like very close to you and is literally there for like the big is someone that you could count on for like life and death shit. Like that's kind of like the requirement for someone to be actually a friend. Anything else, you're using the term friend and you're basically just describing, a friendly acquaintance or a friendly coworker or, something like that. That's not really a friend. If they're just someone you meet once in a while, kind of, you know, talk, small talk, not really anything deep. You wouldn't trust them with any reasonable secrets. You wouldn't trust them to have your back in a sticky situation. Like, that's not a friend. That's
That's an
um,
acquaintance at most.
yeah, and like 99% of people, that's the level of friendship they have with like almost all their quote unquote friends is like they don't trust them to have their backs in a deep situation. And they probably don't even think about it, right? Like they probably don't even think about whether this person has their back or not. And they don't think about whether that, how deep of a how deeply they can trust that person, etc. Like most people just have these friendly acquaintances that are quote unquote friends.
I think one thing I found interesting reading Tolstoy, and I'm not sure if this is an artifact of translation from Russian to English or if this was generally used in English as well in the late 1800s, but they frequently use the term intimate friend to refer to friends as you're describing them. And then friend they use in much the same way as it's used now, which is basically a meaningless acquaintance that you're going to see repeatedly throughout your life, but trust nothing with. So I think that's an interesting distinction that I think is gone now because obviously intimate friend has very different connotations in the modern world.
Well, and people do use the term like close friend,
Yeah,
but or best friend or whatever. And I do think that's like more
or a
in the
good
line.
friend.
That's more in the line with like what an actual friend was. But I remember an interesting bit from evolutionary psychology that I took. And the interesting thing about it was like people didn't have like people in traditional like tribal communities have a very different conception of what a friend is than say Westerners because in tribal communities, you basically make friends for life and you're always with that person. And they're as much a burden as they are a benefit. Like people often don't they don't quote unquote like their friends because their friends are, you know, one of, it's not like they got to pick through an entire city's worth of people and find someone who shared a, some random interest and, discard whoever they found annoying, blah, blah, blah. It's like, this is probably someone who was like somehow connected to their family and they just developed a friendship. And it's like this mutual relationship where you're basically have each other's backs at all time. And it's as burden, burdensome as it is beneficial because if something goes wrong for your friend, you have to go hard. Like it's just like you have to follow through and actually,
Yeah, because
um,
otherwise you're not trustworthy in the slightest.
yeah, it destroys your reputation as any total reputation destruction if your quote unquote friend hits hard times and you're like, oh, sorry, I was only friends when it was convenient, right? It's like, well, now you are the black sheep, the pariah of the community because you're an untrustworthy dirtbag. So, and that's like nobody has that type of friendship, or I would say even people that have like say close friends a lot of the time, that's not the level of friendship they have. They would not be there for them in a true dire situation. They would not pull through. They would, you know,
Yeah, I
fuck it
think
up.
that's the best way to sum it up is that people aren't willing to have someone in their life that's burdensome to them. Like even I would say even as far as family, a lot of people now consider that their family shouldn't be
Yeah, if
burdensome
your
to them.
family voted for Trump, well, fucking throw that person in the
And
trash
it's
because
like
they're an awful human being. It's like, Jesus, really?
it's like family is
Like,
if that's been a question for family, like it's been gone for friends from our culture for a long time. It's like, oh, if your friend is burdensome, just cut them off.
Yeah, as soon as they're not convenient for you, then they're no longer your friend, right? And that is not a friend. That is something else entirely. And
that's
I don't
just
know.
a
We need a
toss
new.
away, right? Like, that's just, it's an acquaintance that you can just swap out with the next, NPC tomorrow if you need to.
Yeah, and that's not a friend. Like if you're willing to ditch someone over them causing you moderate amount or even a high amount of um hardship or effort, it's like then they're not your friend. They're something a friendly acquaintance or a, a conversation partner with something else. Like they're not a friend, and like our culture just does not accept that there's um it's not like a gradient or something. It's like it's pretty cut and dry. It's like if that person is someone you can depend on in the best times and the worst of times, they're a friend. If they're not, there's something else. And we don't have any like words for it or conversations about it really. I don't see anyone talking about that.
No, nobody talks about that, but that's something I've definitely noticed because, like, I have friends and family too who, like, we're going to have serious disagreements and it doesn't really matter. Like, I'm going to help them out, but there's many people I would say that, they would say, we're friends. It's like, I know for a fact that you're not going to help me. Like I can't rely on you, and it's really sad because, like, one of the things I've noticed on especially places like Reddit and other social media sites, the comments are always like, cut that person off. Like they're just toxic in your life. They're a bad influence. Just get rid of them. And I think that is not good because a lot of the time what the person is doing is not particularly like that big of a deal. Like yes, if that person was you know doing all sorts of extremely ruthless criminal activity against you, then you know there's a talk about maybe getting rid of them, right? Like that's somebody who might actually need to be axed from your life. But you know, a lot of the time it's not that at all. It's like it's
Well,
going to
I
be
think
something much less much more minor than that.
I think like our society doesn't isn't very conducive to generating friendships and like true friendships because I think friendships require I think actual physical risk and physical like you need to you need to like do some serious shit to test the friendship to actually build
Yeah, to
like
see
a
if they're
real
worthy,
friendship. Like,
right?
did
It's
they
one of
have
those
your
things like yeah, like actions speak way louder than words. Like words are just
Exactly.
functionally meaningless until you see someone in action having your back. You don't know whether or not they will.
And no one does anything that requires people to like to have. Well, very few people these days do anything that ever would put anyone in a situation to have to do anything that requires action to demonstrate, having your
Yeah,
back.
it's like help
Then
me move
really,
is the biggest deal that there
like
possibly
how
could
many
be.
people get into brawls where your friend jumps in and saves your ass or whatever. Like nobody, like very
Oh,
small
even
percentage.
better, your friend jumps in and you both get your asses kicked.
Exactly. That there's maybe a few percentage of the population that has had an experience where their friend, went to the mat and got the shit kicked out of them along with them, uh, trying to fight it their way out of a situation or whatever. Right? It just doesn't happen anymore for people, and therefore, I just don't think we're wired to, you know, treat someone as a friend until they have demonstrated it through action, and vice versa. You've demonstrated yourself as worthy of being a friend through your action. So it has to be a mutual thing. And the other thing is like, I think that kind of relationship, because of the commitment required and the level required to build it, is going to be very rare. You're not going to actually ever have more than say a handful of friends. Um, but our society is much more like kind of temporary in that sense, quote unquote friends of convenience, whatever. And that's just more about people creating mutually beneficial relationships most of the time.
Short term too, right? Like mutually beneficial in the short term. It's like you kind of get a little bit out of it, and then you move on to the next one once you.
Well, but even long term, like you could be uh, friendly acquaintances with someone for 20 years, no problem. Like it's mutually beneficial for both of you for all those 20 years.
Exactly. And that's not, again, you can know someone for, yeah, 20, 30, 40 years and see them fairly often and be in a mutually beneficial relationship. That's not a friendship unless it's actually been, tried and tested. It's probably just, kind of a charade where um, you're you're both kind of pretending that you're not using each other for mutual benefit. Like I think that's why most people don't talk about it a lot of the time. It's because if you talked about it, it'd be kind of obvious that, oh, we're not actually that close. We're just kind of in it for ourselves because it's at the moment kind of convenient. I don't want to be lonely. I don't want to have any, no one to go out with and eat dinner with. I don't want to have to eat, go out to the restaurant alone. I don't want to have no one to talk to. Therefore, you're good enough, and I'm good enough to serve the same role for you. And if you kind of put it out in the open, it would kind of the magic would be gone. You guys couldn't really pretend anymore.
Well, and the other thing that happens when people do discuss it with especially men, especially macho men, is it's like, of course I'd take a bullet for you, man. Oh man, oh, I would die for you, man. It's like, yeah, it's all just meaningless talk. It's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
what people do. Like there are definitely people who want to hear that they have their friends that would be with them through thick and thin, and then especially there, you have to be distrustful of their words.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everyone's hardwired to just disregard, big talk, right? It's like, oh yeah, man, I'd jump in any fight. I would fucking have your back in any fight. No big deal. Like, yeah, I'd go to the mat for you. It's like, yeah, your automatic reaction is always going to be that guy's full of shit, right? Unless he's actually demonstrated it. I think that's why, like, there's certain situations that you would see where, society is kind of clued in that these situations create really quote unquote really close friendships, and it's like no, they create friendships. This is what a friendship is. Like the military, you notice like, oh yeah, I had my buddy from the military, and it's like that's an actual friend because you guys were in a combat situation together and he had your back. Yeah,
I
that's a
I
friend.
have friends who went and fought in Afghanistan, and they just do not understand civilian life. They're like, how do you guys exist with these like shallow fucking relationships? It drives them crazy. Like it really bothers the ones who actually, the guys that I know, they went and fought. Like they're all combat hardened. They've all killed people. They've all done crazy shit. One guy was a bomb diffuser. Like his life was fucking wild, and he doesn't get it. He's just like, you people have lost your minds. Like this is so sad. Like this life is like just it's a very shallow life, and it really bothers him. And like I understand why he has such a hard time adjusting. It's not even the shit he has done. Like I'm sure that's a part of it, but I think the biggest issue with him was, just like coming back here and just watching the frivolity of just current life in Canada. It just drove him nuts.
Well, it's not just like military, right? You also see, I think you do see it with like, extreme sports, especially or extreme sports or extreme activities where there's also like mutual self-reliance or mutual reliance on each other, like say mountain climbing or something like that. I think
Like
you also
country
see it.
skiing, where that guy's the only guy in 1,000 miles to dig you out of an avalanche.
Yeah, so I think you do see certain activities and situations where those types of friendships do develop, and like people kind of know intuitively that they're qualitatively different. Like people know that
Yeah,
someone's
deep down, right?
military friend, yeah, they know that someone's military friend that had their back into a combat situation is qualitatively different than like the dude that they kind of like hang out with from like college because they both like, some video game or some shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you, I,
Ugh.
people, man, they definitely don't like to hear that for sure because they're like, well, my friends, like my relationships with my gaming buddies are really, really, really tight. It's like they're not garbage. That's not it at all. Like I'm sure they're actually pretty good relationships, but they are not the same thing. Like even close. Like
Yeah, and I think that's the distinction is like there's nothing wrong with having friendly acquaintances or mutually beneficial relationships like that, but that is not that does not make a friendship. That's different.
yeah, I agree. That's a good one. All right, Price, what do you got?
What I've got is probably not the hottest take, but it's that we're facing a sort of epidemic of people living vicariously through videos. And I believe this was first demonstrated by the rise of reality television, because that's pretty much the purpose of it, is to show a bunch of schmucks who generate drama doing things that like a normal person could actually do, as opposed to some fantastical drama in the FBI or CSI or anything like that that is not what a normal person could actually go through in their life. But that we've reached a tipping point of sorts in society with YouTube where I think there are people who want to do things and then they go on YouTube and they watch other people doing them, and that starts to kill their own desire or drive, I guess would be the better term, to do those things that they're watching other people do on YouTube.
Oh, I would say I have to I would say it actually is like extends like far past reality television and other things. It's like everything. People are pissed off and up in arms about, critical race theory and all this other garbage, right? Or whatever else it is. Like, but yet it's just a tiny, 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 tiny chunk of people who ever do anything about anything. They just go watch like some, rage baiting garbage or even good stuff on YouTube, or they listen to podcasts or whatever else it is, and then they're like, oh, that's so terrible, and then they just go right back to video games. It's like,
And what I
fuck.
think is even worse than that, because that's obvious, but I think what's even worse than that, that's less obvious, is they'll listen to someone absolutely dissect the argument and they'll support their point of view from a very intellectual way. And they'll think, I could never dissect it like that, and he's already done it, so there's nothing left for me to do. Like, I can't add anything to this.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, you might not be the guy who, is the deepest of all the deep thinkers in that area, but Jesus Christ, it's like you could at least take that and apply that all over the place, right? Like you could learn that stuff and then go use it somewhere, you know?
Well, I think there's like a couple different things there. I think like you're right that people do get. I think it's like a natural response to like how people work in the sense that you feel like you're getting a chunk of the reward with none of the risk, right? Like
Yeah.
when you vicariously do stuff like in that
Yeah.
sense, like watching stuff or playing video games or whatever, it's like there's something in your brain telling you that this is rewarding. There's like no, none of the risk. You're not going to die. You're not going to get hurt. Nothing bad is going to happen to you because your brain has been told over and over and over again that nothing bad will happen. You're sitting on the fucking couch. What could happen? You might get a fucking back cramp. Like
You might
it's
get bed sores depending how long you've been there.
exactly like that's the worst thing that can happen to you. So there's this thing where it's like, oh, nice big benefit, but no risk. Great. I'm going to do this forever. And
Yeah, exactly.
I think the other thing is the like you were saying, like the you see someone do dissect an argument super well, or it extends to everything. Like I was just watching a random video on this person restoring a little model car, and the video was probably like 3 minutes, and that was probably, in reality, probably took the person like good 40 hours to do the restoration or 30 hours to do the restoration, and it probably took them 10 years to get the knowledge of how to do that restoration. And therefore we just see like um concentrated amazingness, and I think that's discouraging in a certain sense where it's like
Yeah,
if I'm not the
exactly.
best if I'm not the best at something, or
And I
I'm not.
can't do it in 15 minutes on this video, then what's the point?
It's not even I think because I think this goes back to our evolutionary brain where people are niche finders. They find like people try to develop skills and talents that other people don't have, because being good at something that someone else is good at isn't very valuable because someone's already better at you than it, and you're not going to outcompete them.
Yeah,
So
it's like you see these people doing these things, and our monkey brain is like, oh, well, if I can see them, they must be in my tribe.
Yeah,
exactly, it's like
exactly. It's like, well, you could do
our
that in your area, not like
it's
that's
it's like our tribe already has a model car restorer. I'm not going to go invest 15 years to learn how to model car renew, because that's probably not, a super high demand fucking job. Therefore, it's not like our brain just can't handle the fact that, there's room for thousands of those people. And just because one other person does it really well on the internet doesn't mean you can't, make your niche there.
yeah, like you could do it in your own. I actually was just thinking about this a couple days ago, where it's, you know, because you're watching, somebody like LeBron James on television. Does that mean that you should, and he's always going to be so much better at you than at basketball? Does that mean that you should never play like pickup basketball? Like, no, of course not. Like, and that would be kind of silly, right? But that was exactly what I was thinking, is because people see that and they can see it from all over the world, whatever it is that you're looking at, which is awesome. Like, it's an amazing piece of technology that has allowed us to do this. It does have some extremely discouraging effects, and like I feel that in my own life all the time. And it's you actually have to push really. You have to be aware of it, and you have to push pretty hard.
That's actually what clued me into it. Is I was watching an old NHL rerun from the '60s, and you watch these guys play, and you're like, they're obviously very intelligent hockey players. Like they're making smart plays, but physically, like their level is lower than a modern day a men's league game. Like they're not skating as fast, they're not shooting as hard, they're not hitting as hard. Uh, why do like I just kind of wondered like what it means, and I feel like that the fact that you can watch these people be so amazing is actually discouraging and leads to a lot of anger in the people that still play the game. Like there's so much violence in at least 20-year-old males that play hockey that's just like bizarre. It doesn't make a lot of sense why these people play the game in such an aggressive and violent way instead of having fun. But I do think that plays into it, is that they're always comparing themselves to these players that are like the pinnacle of humanity at playing the
Yeah.
game because they watch it all the time.
And it's like, if you can't be that, then don't, like, either don't try, don't bother,
It just makes
or
them frustrated with the game because they'll
yeah,
try to
or
do a
exactly.
deke that they saw Patrick Kane do, or they'll try to make a play that they saw Crosby do, and they don't do it, and that's frustrating. Like it can be done, and you didn't do it, but other people do it. Like I think that plays into it to probably not a huge extent, but I think it does.
I think it really does, though, because I was listening to a conversation between Jordan Peterson and this school teacher who spoke out against like the indoctrination of his school, like, and he was an English critic, like that's what he was trained to do, but he really wanted to be like this like he wanted to be like an English writer and a brilliant one, and he realized he couldn't do it, and it made him really angry and really bitter, and so he said that he spent the first, almost 10 years or something of his life just being an extremely bitter, angry person. Might not have been entirely 10 years, but it was a big chunk of time out of his life that he had spent being angry, bitter, contemptuous. So all he did, he said, when it came to English, was just tear it down. He was a diehard Marxist, postmodernist, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, but he melded them together, and just like shit all over English and all over these what he said is like these old white men. And he said it was driven entirely by the fact that he couldn't produce what they could produce, and it drove him nuts. And like I think that's actually a much more common phenomenon than people would care to admit. Like I've noticed that myself, where it's like I have to say, it's like, well, don't compare yourself to who you were, or don't compare yourself to whatever you're doing, like LeBron James. Like compare yourself to how good were you yesterday. Like again, that's another famous Peterson quote, but I think it's a really important one, because otherwise you will
Pretty
drive
sure
yourself
that's a
nuts.
pretty famous quote from like
The Bible.
before fucking words were invented.
Yeah,
But
exactly. I do
Yeah.
like that, but that actual quotation is Peterson's rendition of it. But yes, it's probably tens of thousands of years old.
well, I think that is yeah, I think that is slightly related, but I don't think that it's like fully in line with necessarily like the niche thing, but I guess to a bit, but like
Yeah, it's not entirely the same thing. I think we're a little bit off
I
to the
mean,
side, but
the whole idea of that quote being really old is like, if your tribe needs 10 fighters, you can't have 9 guys who think, oh, I can't do the job because this guy's the best fighter. Like, it's like, oh, you don't need to be the best fighter. You need to be a fighter.
well, I do think that it is more frequently felt in things that are like I do think people weight it differently when it's things that are kind of winner takes all versus things that are kind of anyone can do it. Like I don't think people look at some brilliant, I don't know, electrician and go, okay, well, there's no point trying to be an electrician. I think
Yeah.
I think there is a bit of an understanding that like we need lots of electricians regardless, right? And even if you're not the best electrician, you're still probably going to get paid. Like I think there's certain jobs that we understand that are like good enough jobs, and then there's jobs that we understand or situations we understand that are like winner take all, which is a lot of like entertainment or like you were talking about with the
sports,
professor,
yeah,
writing, whatever, where it really is maybe the top 0.1001% or whatever, like 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 100 or 1 in 1 million people in that area that ever become anything meaningful, like actually self-sustaining, pay their own way through life, doing that as a job. And so I think um, when we see people in those things, it's the most discouraging for those specific areas that we understand intuitively are winner takes all versus I don't know what you want to call non-winner take all situations, but I don't think people react the same in those to those two different scenarios.
I would agree with
Yeah,
that for
for
sure.
sure. There's definitely a lot of nuance, but I think it's a problem that I haven't heard brought up and just crossed my mind, and I think there's validity to it, at least in a significant amount of areas.
Yeah,
Yeah, I definitely
I'd
agree.
100% agree.
Like I think more and more of people's lives are being like lived vicariously, right? Like it's ever worsening problem that started. I mean, it probably started in real concern with like radio, or
Yeah,
maybe even
maybe
like
even
goddamn printing
books.
presses.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
printing press might have, and I mean, it would have been a factor of human life all the way back to storytelling, but it wouldn't have been the same effect because obviously the prevalence of storytelling and the visual imagery aren't the same. But I'm sure there were people who just wish they were Achilles. and they just we're like, oh, I'll never be as good of a warrior.
Yeah, fuck trying to be what was it, God's son or whatever. Wasn't he like son
Hercules
of?
or oh,
Wasn't
Achilles
Achilles
was uh,
some son of some bitch that was supernatural or
I
godlike or
mean,
some shit? I don't
he
know.
he was probably Zeus's son because who wasn't in Greek mythology? But I'm not up on it at the moment.
Goddamn, my hot take is that we need more Greek mythology in school.
True.
Yeah, I love Greek mythology. When I was in grade 6 and 7 and 8, that's all I read. It's fucking
Um,
glorious.
you guys got any more on that one, or we're gonna hit our
Nope.
last?
Might as well move on, I think.
Yeah. So I got the last one, and mine is another institutional thing, and that is I feel that mental asylums should be brought back, and they never should have been gotten rid of, and like or massively underutilized or demoted in their status, and we actually need them way more than we really actually know.
Well, I mean, we don't need them, I hope,
Yeah,
but
well,
society as a
speak
whole.
for
For
yourself.
yourself, yeah.
Yeah, speak for yourself, Price.
Fucking presuming
I
mental
want
wellness.
3 squares a day, and I want some damn
Check your
AC,
privilege.
and I could get it there.
You want to
But
expand?
yeah, so essentially, I've noticed that a lot of people think that it is, inhumane and ridiculous that we'd ever have such things as like a mental institution, except for like really mentally, like truly, like the ones who are running around hacking up people on the streets.
Injure themselves and others.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's ridiculous, and I think we should have much more enrollment in the mental institutions. I think parts of Vancouver and Toronto and other areas are just screaming examples of like what happens when you don't deal with it, and you don't want to be throwing these people in prison because that's not really fair, but you don't want to just leave them on the streets. Like I've noticed all sorts of problems. New York's gone to hell in a handbasket. Like, a big part of the platform that some of the new mayors are campaigning on, or potential mayors, is like, protecting the citizens from like the mentally deranged
Most people.
the mentally deranged people from like knocking people out on the streets. Like they've had a big rash of problems with stuff like that. But the biggest thing is, why would you ever want mentally ill people to just languish on the streets? There's a lot of them in Vancouver particularly, but that I've seen that just, like they should not be there.
Well,
Like that is just brutal. Like they are not functioning well enough they need to just be committed. And I know that a lot of the argument is, well, you're taking away the freedom, but I think at that stage, man, like, are they really free? Not even in the slightest. Like a lot of these, you'd have to be careful with the, like where do you draw the line? Obviously, that's a huge debate, but I think it's pretty friggin' clear that you don't leave them
But he
where they're at.
obviously got right after homosexuals.
What's that?
right before you mean?
No, right after. Lock them all up. Oh,
Yeah, I was
no,
gonna.
so the obvious like worst case scenario is the government mandating something like that, where it's incredibly against modern moral values. But for the same reason, it's very unlikely that something like that would happen in a modern democracy.
I think this
We'll
is a.
see. We'll see the demographic swings in Canada, and we'll see how ludicrous that of a assumption might become. So I do think it is, something you actually do have to be careful about. But like you really don't want the government to have the power of saying, oh, they're mentally insane for liking the same sex, like throw them in there. But I do think you're right. Like that's extremely unlikely. So
I think it's like kind of a combination of like dysfunction. Like it's like two. I think people pushing back against it are over overutilizing, yeah, freedom and also compassion, right? Like it's like it, I think the compassion element also like blinds people to how troubled a lot of the people are and how like difficult, you know, I think there's like this along with the compassion, it's kind of like if everyone just got the kind of the right kick or the right push in the in a good direction, that they'll sort themselves out and they'll become productive members of society, right? Like we can't write these people off.
We
It's
can't write
not.
them off and we can't commit them because that's unfair.
Well,
That's
it's unconscionable to commit them because that's an admittance of defeat and saying that like this person is literally the only thing they're really good for in society is to be locked up and kept away from everyone else, and there's not really any hope for them to kind of recover and become productive members of society, right? It's like it's basically admitting defeat that they're not really helpable or not really
yes, exactly.
Well, and
and
yeah. Oh, sorry. Did you have more?
Nope.
well, I was just gonna say, like, on the freedom piece, I think it, I think there is a point there where, yeah, it's really hard to draw the line, like, um, but at the same time, I do think you have to consider other people's rights as well. Like, that's another thing that gets lost. It's like, you know, I know, say in Vancouver, does the rest of society literally have to live in a place where there's dirty fucking needles all over the
In
city
part, well, also in parks
just
that,
because?
well, like in my area, Vancouver, which is like right on the edge of one of the wealthiest areas in Vancouver, there's just straight up people doing drugs and leaving needles in the fucking alleyways. And when I was living in a different part of Vancouver, which was another really wealthy area, even I'm not super wealthy living in these areas. There are some cheaper rental places, but there was like a really beautiful little kids park that had just been built and fucking needles in the grass. Like just it was a dedicated kids park, and the fucking junkies would come in and leave needles straight up, sticking up into the like from the grass, kind of hidden, so that you could just a kid playing around would just step on them. It was
Well, to give some of the history behind the deinstitutionalization movement that did occur, their ideal world that they believed could actually be realized involved a ton of halfway houses in which the people would live in small groups and get individualized care while they were rehabilitated into society when they had mental illness, instead of going to an institution where they're in large groups with depersonalized care. And instead of halfway houses, because those are expensive, they just did nothing. And you had, in Canada, I believe, around 100,000 deinstitutionalized people just go out into the ether with their mental illnesses and inability to care for themselves, hence why they're institutionalized, therefore becoming homeless. And in America, it was 500,000 or more.
Well, the other problem, like you're saying, is even if they offer, say, a halfway house, it it's a proposition that many, especially the ones that are homeless because of substance abuse issues or substance abuse especially, will decline
Yeah.
because obviously in a halfway house you can't have people using substances because it's just well, the liability around it, also the fact that you can't have drugs around or you shouldn't have drugs around clean people. If there's clean people in the halfway house, it's not fair that they're constantly have to deal with a bunch of people shooting up around them. Like how hard is it going to be for them to stay on the wagon when buddy's fucking shooting heroin in the living room every day? So you kind of have to make a hard rule that no, you cannot use drugs here, um, on the premise. And then they say, okay, if I can't do that, then I'm not going to stay in your halfway house, or I'm not going to stay in your subsidized housing, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's kind of like, I think at a certain point, you do just have to say, if you're not going to accept help, you're going to say no to it, and you're going to continue to break the law because you have an addiction. No, we won't put you in jail because that's not going to help you, but you're going to be removed from, you know, the rest of society because you are causing huge harms to people in the greater society. And we've given you multiple options to, you know, voluntarily deal with it or mitigate it, and you chose none of them. So
Well,
yeah.
and like in the case of if you do institutionalize people, I believe my understanding is that the most effective institutionalization method was basically to take people into an institution where they got 3 meals a day at regular times. They had a 10-hour workday at regular times, and that work was hard physical labor. And there was a significant amount of recovery from mental illness over the course of time under just a regular routine life like almost anyone else would live. You're just in a controlled environment where you don't have access to drugs or alcohol or other coping mechanisms like that.
Yeah, and throw in I don't yeah, throw in some pay there, so it's not actual slavery.
True.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
You know,
okay,
I'm
but all their pay goes towards paying their room and board. Like, you hate to see it, but it is what it is.
well, I no, yeah, I could definitely see a system where yeah, you do offer physical labor or have physical labor or labor and pay them as well, get them used to doing work. I don't know what
Yeah.
I don't know what the best institutionalization method is. I'm no research on that, but I just don't think at like if you go back to principles, I don't think it's fair that society has to deal with the consequences of people at the fringes who have repeatedly rejected options for help. Like, yes, maybe there could be more help available. Blah blah blah. Like all the bleeding heart level bullshit that goes around. I'm sure there's some merit to it, but at the same time, a lot of those people have rejected offer after offer because they don't want to. And at that point, like really, we need to stop being so compassionate and start having, a little bit of take your medicine approach. And yeah, uh, maybe take your medicine is a year off the streets where you actually just can't use drugs, don't have any access to it, and are, you know, kept on a regular routine. Is that literally is
No,
that
that's a concentration cap on par with Hitler's fucking Germany, so can't do it.
Okay, there, Mr. Holocaust revisionist.
Fuck. I
Just
guess I'm
tell me
going to
they're just
jail.
denying the Holocaust again?
tell them
Yeah,
But
they're
no,
just
I 100% agree because what like I've noticed there is, especially in a city like Vancouver or Portland or
work will set you free.
I guess in this case it might, from what Price was saying, it might literally do that. Um, but what I've noticed in cities like Vancouver or Portland or whatever, like the very left-leaning cities, they want to be progressive and compassionate and whatnot, but then the compassion just runs amok. Like I know people whose businesses in cities have been destroyed because there's laws now that prohibits the cops from coming in and like kicking the homeless people out of their little encampment in front of businesses, so people no longer go to the business and they've lost their ability to feed their children. Like that's actually quite insane to think that your ability to feed your kids is now gone because the city has decided it would be too mean to allow the removal of a homeless person from public property in front of a business which you pay your rent and everything, right? And like places like Vancouver, San Francisco and whatnot, like I know people who have left San
Well,
Francisco mostly because it's just covered in human shit. Like they just like they're sick of it. Like I know somebody who's like was working, and they were just sick of it. They couldn't stand walking and having to check the human poop tracking app to make sure that their walk to work, like prior to COVID, was free from human shit.
feces free.
And they couldn't do it. Like they're just like, I can't find a fucking path that's free of human shit. Like this is insane. And it's just like what it really is to me is just compassion run amok.
well,
And
I think I would amend that to compassion. Like, there's more than one type of compassion, and one, I think you see the one version of compassion, which is like, um, or empathy or whatever you want to call it, that where people see someone in dire straits and they just want to immediately help them. Like they want to alleviate their immediate suffering and take care of them and care for them essentially, right in
yeah,
the immediacy. And that's like a very uh, motherly type of compassion or whatever, where it's like
exactly.
there's this helpless person, and the way that you help this helpless person because they can't help themselves is you just take care of all their needs in the immediacy. The other type of compassion is like, it's really the, teach the man to fish compassion, or the long-term compassion, or the kind of more cold-hearted, or um,
Paternalistic.
yeah, paternalistic compassion,
Yeah, I was gonna
which
say
is saying,
more masculine.
I want to make you a better person and make you put you in a position where you can help yourself and where you don't need my help, because that in the long run that's better for you. And I think you need both, right? Because
Oh yeah, absolutely.
there are people in situations where they are helpless and all they do need is someone to take care of them. But I think like that has swept through our kind of like collective conscious, or whatever you want to call it, our institutions, and pretty much the only, or most of the compassion that is offered, or most of the help that is offered these days, is that, the helpless type, where it's like, oh, I'm just going to take care of all your needs, whatever. You're not responsible for changing at all. You're not responsible for doing anything. It's all on us. And that is crazy, because you need both. You need a healthy dose of both, and you need to be able to kind of pick and choose when one is necessary and the other isn't.
Yeah, you have to have the
Interestingly,
foresight, or not even the foresight, but the awareness to make sure that you are slotting in the correct one at the correct time, because otherwise you might actually do more harm than good. And I 100% agree. Like, I think that it is truly the most of the time right now what you're seeing is that compassion, immediate compassion, just always being the default answer, which is not, well, clearly just doesn't work all the time.
interestingly, in the U.S., which is always a great place to look for experiments because they have 50 states that function very independently, the state that is most successful at moving people out of like the lowest rung of the poverty line is Utah, where almost the entirety of their aid given to people in bad situations is through the Mormon church, which is very paternalistic compassion in the sense that they'll help everyone out, but there's an expectation that the people won't need help eventually. And that since they were helped out and they won't need help eventually, then they should also be helping out in the future and do the same for other people, as opposed to the more
You
maternal sense where people are just taken care of indefinitely.
Yeah, you pay it back, right? Like, once you're helped out and you get yourself back on track, you pay it back by helping other people, right?
Yeah, you're helping people out so they can rejoin society as a productive member. And then since they're now a productive member of society that helps people out, they help people out.
Yeah. Well, man, say that in this certain companies and you're going to be thrown out a window.
But Utah's a very interesting example in that case because it is not a government led initiative primarily. The
Yeah.
government pretty much just leaves social welfare to the Mormon church from the one article I was reading, admittedly.
Yeah, I think it's also, yeah, it's, you kind of set expectations with that, right? It's like if you tell someone, oh, well, we're just gonna, give you handouts forever or whatever, then they might just take that. Like, well, what's the
Yeah,
incentive
where's
for
the
them
incentive structure?
to do differently? And can you really blame them that they don't get their life back on track when you say, as long as your life's not on track, we'll keep helping you. Like, oh, the help stops when I get my life back on track. Well, maybe I might have some incentive to keep it off track then. Like,
That's
it's
another weird one in America where how much I believe it costs around $30,000 for every person in the US that's getting assistance for being low income, which is that's a lot of money to make. That sounds maybe low income's wrong. There's a certain term for it, but that's a lot of money to make up if you're going to pass the threshold of acquiring that federal aid and get into the threshold of making more money than you would have received in aid.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
I agree. I don't know. Institutions need to be considered again for sure.
yeah, exactly. I think that it's I think your overall point, and something I've been thinking about for a long time too, is we need to move a lot more in the direction of having that paternalistic um, support network. rather than just the maternalistic. And you know that doesn't have to be attached to women or men. It's just like the general way to conceptualize it.
Shockingly, both men and women have both
Yes,
masculine and feminine aspects
it's
to their
almost like
character.
human beings are not like one dimensional or unidimensional creatures. Like
I'm
it's,
talking to a bunch of fucking purple-haired,
Hippies.
pink-haired, fucking gender theorists.
Hey, if we had pink hair, we'd say that men and women have 72 aspects of gender within them.
well, now
At
it's up
least.
into the
I
thousands.
think
So
it's
who knows?
infinite because it's a spectrum and it's a
Yes,
it's
it's
a
not or it's not discrete. It's
But it's not a
continuous.
spectrum, it's a bunch of boxes because the spectrum is just too complicated. There's a box that you can fit into, including one that is gender fluid, which means that you could be any of them, but it's still a box.
you can so there's 71 boxes and one that moves between the boxes.
Yeah,
Fuck, that's
at
simple.
least. Because having masculine and feminine and a sliding spectrum between them was much too complex for the average person to understand.
True, true. Well, I think that about does it for
That's it
my
for me.
contributions to hot takes.
Yeah,
Alrighty.
it's a good one.
All right, peace.
Peace.
Peace.